Right. All right, before we stretch our first canvas then, let's take a little closer look at the tools. You will certainly want some sort of a metal straight edge like this yardstick. This is very handy. Not only can you measure canvas with it, but you can use it to draw straight lines on the canvas. Lines that you will use to cut your canvas with a pair of scissors, and you will want a tape measure. For safety, especially if you're using the stapler, you want a pair of safety goggles. You can buy them at any hardware store. It's cheap insurance against injuring your eyes. I find very helpful a soft hammer too, because when you're putting your wooden stretcher frames together, sometimes it's difficult to make the pieces fit all the way together. And if you have a soft hammer, you can tap these corners together a lot better than if you're just using your hand, and it hurts your hand. But if you don't have a rubber hammer, you can make do with a scrap of an old 2x4, a block of wood, because that also won't dent or beat up the wood like an ordinary steel hammer would. Another tool you'll find useful is a square, because when you first put your frame together, you'll want to square the corners. This is called a tri-square. If you happen to have a big carpenter's framing square, you can squeeze your frame against it like this and square it up. A framing square isn't absolutely necessary, but it is nice to have. You'll also find various kinds of pliers useful. Ordinary flat-jawed pliers are good for removing tacks and staples when you want to get them back out of a frame. Side cutter pliers like this, normally used for cutting wire, can dig down deeper in the wood when you have a little fragment of a staple or something to get out. Like that. Needle nose pliers are very handy, especially if you're going to use tacks, because rather than try to hold tacks with your fingers and then bang your fingers, it's a lot easier to use these needle nose pliers. Of course, that'll require a helper because you don't have enough hands to hold the needle nose pliers, the hammer, and the canvas stretching pliers. But this is a much better and safer way for a helper to hold a tack. If you do hit your helper's fingers a lot, you'll find that you don't have many helpers. No volunteers, they're funny that way. So, pliers of various kinds are useful, and you probably already have some around the house. You'll need a small, flat-bladed screwdriver like this to dig out tacks and staples that have gone really deep and pry them up to where the pliers can get a hold of them. And you'll want a pair of leather gloves to protect your hands when you do that, and I'll show you why in a minute. I would also advise you to get a file, because some of these stretcher frames have very sharp corners, but it only takes a few strokes of a file to knock those sharp corners down, and then they won't cut your canvas. If you don't have a file, you can use a piece of sandpaper. That works just as well. Now for the tools that actually attach the canvas to the wooden stretcher frame. When you fasten canvas to the frame, the fasteners are either going to be tacks or they're going to be staples. Now if you decide to use tacks, all you need is a box of tacks and a tack hammer. They should be number 4 size tacks. They come in plain steel or they come copper coated like this, if you want to get fancy. Number 4 tacks have a head 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and the shaft is 1/2 of an inch long. A tack hammer has a magnetic end so that you can pick up a tack one-handed, like this. And the only drawback to the tacks is that it takes a little more trouble to get them into the frame. About a dozen hits per tack. Whereas if you use a stapler, your fastener goes in with one pop and you're done. And you don't risk knocking your frame out of square, which hammering can do. And that's why most people use staples. But once you've decided to use staples, then you've got more decisions to make. Although there's only one kind of a tack hammer, There are a lot of different kinds of staplers. And you have to decide which one to buy. This is only a representative sample here. There are hand-operated staplers. There are electric staplers. There are air-operated staplers like these. As for the staples, there's really only one sort of a staple, although they come in different lengths. But they all look like this. The sizes we use for canvas attachment are the 1/4 inch length, or the 5/16 inch length, or the 3/8 inch length. What we're measuring is the length of the leg here. If you look on this box, on the side of this box, you can see all the different sizes that these come in. We use the first three. This one here is that. What I like to use is the shortest, the 1/4 inch. These. The legs are 1/4 of an inch long, and the reason I like the shorter ones is because they'll go into the wood more easily, and they can also be pried out more easily if you have to, because they don't go in as deep. Whatever length you buy, you have to make sure that you get the type of staple that fits your particular staple gun. So that's a factor to consider when you choose a staple gun. Are staples widely available and easily available for that gun? And when you do buy staples, I suggest that you buy them in bulk. I like to buy them by the thousands, like this. Not only are they less expensive this way, but you can go a long time before you have to buy more staples. By the way, I want to say something about safety here. These staple guns are entirely capable of shooting a staple through the air, like this. It can shoot a staple like a projectile. And if you happen to be pointing it at yourself when it goes off, it could fire that staple at your face and maybe hit you in the eye. So you want to have these goggles on anytime you mess with staplers for safety. And they do nice things for your hair too, don't they? Right. Now when you choose a staple gun, like anything else in life, you get what you pay for. If you choose the less expensive hand-operated types, you won't spend very much, but you also won't get the power or the convenience of the more expensive type. But the hand-operated ones can get the job done. Now, although these hand-operated ones are inexpensive, the drawback is that they don't really have the power of the other types, the power staplers. The result is, as you can see here in the one that I shot in a minute ago, they don't always drive them all the way in. And when that happens, what you have to do is get some sort of a hammer, and I keep an ordinary carpenter's hammer around for this purpose, and tap them in the rest of the way. And sometimes they will fold over instead of going down, and then you have to dig them out and start over.